أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق أجمعين سيدنا محمد عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا متقبلا ورزقا حلالا طيبا يا أكرم الأكرمين. وبعد. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless your steps coming here with the intention of seeking knowledge. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our efforts and to bless the knowledge that we're learning. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the amal, the ability to act upon the knowledge that we've been learning all of our life. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the ilm and the knowledge we're learning for His own sake and not for the dunya or anything else. Before we start talking about the actual content or the actual topic of Dar al-Akhirah or the Hereafter or Yawm al-Qiyamah, there is something very important that we need to introduce with talking about the Aqidah or understanding this part of our Aqidah, believing in the Hereafter, believing in Yawm al-Qiyamah, and believing in death and in what is going to happen in the afterlife. One of the very famous scholars of Aqidah and history, specifically in the late centuries of the Muslim tradition, his name was Imam Ahmad al-Dardir. He was a very famous theologian in the almost like the 16th or 17th century, and about like the 9th or 10th Hijri century. He was a famous Muslim jurist who belonged to the Maliki school of thought. He had so many different books and he led so many different institutions of knowledge and learning at that time. Imam al-Dardir rahimahullah, he authored a very short poem covering the basics of Aqidah for the beginners of the students of knowledge. And as most of the books of Aqidah that were written during that time, he would classify the book over three main sections. So most of the Aqidah books cover three main topics. The first topic, which is the most essential and the most important, those of you who attended the Introduction to Islamic Sciences course would be very familiar with this, is talking about what do we need to know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divinities or the ilahiyat, what every person needs to know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the attributes, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the second section, moving on, would be talking about the prophethood. Who is the prophet? Who is a messenger? And what is the meaning of being a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is the job of a prophet? And what are the qualifications or the conditions that have to apply to a person to be given this message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the third section of Aqidah, which is the last one, is what we call the unseen, as-sam'iyat. We call it as-sam'iyat in Arabic language. It's derived from the word sami'a, to hear something, whatever was heard. And we call it as-sam'iyat because the only way we can believe in these things is through our trust in the source of information that told us about these things. Again, so the third part of Aqidah, it's called the Sam'iyat, whatever we heard from the Prophet ﷺ, and we merely believe in all of these things only because the Prophet ﷺ told us about this. Is this considered to be just a blindly following notion that we just like follow whatever was told to us about the unseen, about Yawm al-Qiyamah, about the Hereafter and all of these things? Or do we view it as it's actually based on another premises that came before this, that we believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the first place. Then after we established our aqidah in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we established our aqidah in the prophethood. So we understood that there is a prophet, there is a messenger, there is someone that was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to inform us about certain things. If we established our belief in this person, specifically here talking about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and if we are comfortable with this belief, basically, we can understand that whatever he is going to tell us, it has to be true, right? So it is actually based on a logical premise. It is not only based on, okay, just because there is a story that was told to us before. Or we believe in the angel of death because, like, we heard a story when we were kids that there's something called the angel of death. Or when we were at the Islamic school, when we were young, we were told that there are two angels who will come to you in the grave and they will ask you, like, who is your Lord? Who was that person that was sent to you? Right? What is your religion? We only believed in these things because these things are the stories that we used to hear when we were kids. And then when we grow up, and by the time goes, Sometimes we get that wrong misconception that we are believing in these things only because you're just like some childhood memories. And if we want to question these things on a rational or logical base, we're not going to be able to prove them. And this misconception is in the minds of so many different people. Sometimes maybe they're not going to express about it, but sometimes it's inherently or it's actually deeply like planted in our subconscious, thinking about our religion and thinking about the aqidah that we are following. But when we think of it as a series of logical arguments that we have established from the very beginning, that we believed in Allah to begin with. And if we believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we believe that He is attributed with all the attributes of perfection. And part of His perfection is that He can do whatever He wants. He is able to do whatever He wants, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He can hold us accountable for whatever He wants. He can legislate whatever He wants. And then if He chooses to send us someone from our kind to tell us do some things and do not do some things, it's completely up to Him. The only thing that we deserve that He actually granted us also is that this person will have a proof that he's actually sent by me. And then this person came and he brought us a proof that he's a messenger. And when he brought that proof, we had the option to test that proof to see if this is actually a valid proof or not. And then after we made sure, supposedly we all believe in this already, after we made sure that this is a valid, authentic source that can tell us about things that we have no knowledge about, whatever he's going to tell us afterwards, we are okay with. If he's telling us that Dhuhr is 4 rak'ahs and Maghrib is 3, we don't have a problem with this. Exactly as if he's telling us that there will be something called the question of the grave, we shouldn't have a problem with this. There is a sirat, there is a bridge that you have to cross on the day of judgment, sure. There is an actual scale that our a'mal, our deeds will be placed in two different sides of that scale. And the a'mal and the deeds will be weighed on the day of judgment. And it depends on what you put forward in your life, you would see the reflection of this during that time with the mizan or the scale. We're okay with that. There is a hellfire, sure. There is Jannah, and this Jannah has multiple doors, has different levels, has ranks, has all these blessings and the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason that we take all of these things as true facts and established facts, it's because the source that told us about these things is whether the Quran that we have established our belief in, or the Sunnah, the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we already established that it's something that we are sure that it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not only from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those are the three main sections that I was just talking about. So most of the books of Aqidah are covering these three main sections: the Ilahiyat, and Nubuwat, as-Sam'iyat, the divinities or the prophethood, and the unseen, usually in this same order. Back to the story of Imam al-Dardi rahimahullah. So he authored his matan, his treatise on Aqidah. It's a short poem of Aqidah. And then he did it on the same way of divinities and then the prophethood and then the unseen. After he was done with this, he wanted to give like a kind of a beautiful conclusion talking about the reflection of our belief of these things in our spirituality. He taught about Allah, he taught about the prophets, he talked about the Yawm al-Qiyamah, and he taught about the resurrection, the question in the grave, and the mizan, the sirat, and all these different things that we will be discussing inshallah. And then he said one verse that is very beautiful. He said, وَيَنْطَوِي فِي كِلْمَةِ الْإِسْلَامِ مَا قَدْ مَضَى مِنْ سَائِرِ الْأَحْكَامِ. So that was towards the end of the poem. And he's saying, whatever I've been explaining to you throughout all this poem, it's all contained in kalimatul Islam, in the word of Islam. وَيَنْطَوِي فِي كِلْمَةِ الْإِسْلَامِ مَا قَدْ مَضَى مِنْ سَائِرِ الْأَحْكَامِ. This includes whatever you believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever you believed in the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever you believed in the hereafter and in death, in the grave, in the Yawm al-Qiyamah, all of these things, they are included in that phrase that you would say in your life, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So it's all contained in this. Everything you've learned about your aqidah, it's in kalimatul Islam. And it's interesting that we call it kalimatul Islam, by the way. The phrase of the divine oneness, or the word of Islam, or the word of Tawheed. We call it like that in Arabic, kalimatul Islam, and we translate it to be the word of Islam, right? Kalimatul Islam is a combination of two words. We call it, in Arabic, we call it idafa. Two different words combined in one structure. It's not a sentence, it's still a word, but it's called idafa, the genitive in English grammar. The genitive is actually a noun and another different noun, a noun or an adjective, a noun. Like it's a combination of two different words, usually different derivations of words, that gives higher meaning than the word by itself can give, but it's still not qualified to be a sentence. And each kind of genitive or idafa in Arabic language, or even in English, it has to imply a certain kind of meaning. Why did you combine these two words together? So you need to think of a kind of a relation between the first word and the second word. So when you say the word of Islam, there has to be a relation between the word, which is the first part of the word, and Islam, the second part of this word. So the idafa has to have a meaning, has to have an implication here. Some people call it idafa to dal ila al-madlul, because the first one implies the second one. Because if you say that word that causes your Islam, which he made it a condition for any person to become a Muslim, he has to say La ilaha illallah. If he says anything else, if he prays, if he fasts, if he does anything in this life without saying La ilaha illallah, it doesn't count. He has to say La ilaha illallah first. Okay, I'm gonna say a different name of the names of Allah. No, you have to say La ilaha illallah. As a scholar said, if he says all Asma'ullah al-Husna, he still has to say La ilaha illallah. That's the condition. It's the key, Miftahul Islam. You have to say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, and then you practice whatever you want to practice in this religion. But it's your entrance to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say La ilaha illallah. That's why they said, هي إضافة الدال إلى المدلول. And some people said إضافة السبب إلى المسبب. Is that when you say it causes your Islam, which is basically almost the same meaning. Then they said we called it a word even though it's a sentence. Right? We say kalimatul Islam, but what is that word? It is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. It's actually two sentences, but we still call it a word, and this is something common in the Arabic language. وَكِلْمَةٌ بِهَا كَلَامٌ قَدْ يُؤَمْ. Imam Ibn Malik in his grammar poem, he said sometimes we use the word kalima, the word, to imply a full sentence that has actually a solid meaning. And then when we think of La ilaha illallah, most of us know it to be La ilaha ma'budun illallah, or La ilaha bihaqqin illallah. There is no God worthy of being worshipped except Allah. So there is something understood that is not actually mentioned explicitly in the sentence that we have to make the guess what is that word that is emitted from the sentence. Because La ilaha illallah is not a full sentence. So the meaning is there is no God worthy of being worshipped. Worthy of being worshipped is not actually mentioned in the sentence La ilaha illallah. But this is the way we understood it. La ilaha ma'budun bihaq illallah. And the other interesting thing, the sentence starts with negation. It does not affirm something. It negates something first. The explicit meaning of the sentence is negation, and the implicit is actually affirmation. Because if you negate any kind of other deity or godship that to be attributed to anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the implicit or the implication is, so there is only one true God. And this, even it sounds as a theological rule in theology, but it has a very beautiful spiritual reflection. When we think of these things spiritually, the scholars of spirituality have a very beautiful concept that is called at-takhliyatu qabla at-tahliya. The removal before the acquisition. It's the literal translation. Which means if you want to, and spirituality is trying to train you and to get you to acquire all the beautiful traits and characteristics. But they would tell you at the beginning, you will never be able to do this before removing and purifying your heart from all what we call the diseases of the hearts or the problems of the hearts. So before trying to acquire patience, forbearance, love, compassion, and all these different beautiful traits, you need to purify your heart from hatred, from envy, from having su'dhan or bad thinking about people or even about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why you call at-takhliyatu qabla at-tahliya. So they said, you build your iman by negating any sort of godship to anyone or to anything in your life. And then you would come comfortably to the conclusion that it's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was worthy of being worshipped. So La ilaha illallah described all the divinities and all what has to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the second part, it's talking about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Muhammadun Rasulullah. And it's a condition to say it to become a Muslim. If you say the first part, it is not enough. You have to affirm in your heart and by saying that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the messenger of Allah. If you say, okay, I need to believe in Allah, but I don't want to believe in the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you cannot be a Muslim. You might be something else, but you cannot be a Muslim. It's a condition. And it's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to believe in. And it's an honor to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that his name is just combined in the same sentence with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Muhammadur Rasulullah implies all what was discussed in the books of Aqidah about the prophethood. So for the significance and the importance of this sentence, Islam made it a reflection of all the aqidah, all the creed, all the religion that you are having in your heart, and made it the only condition for a person to become a Muslim. That's why it's a wajib to say at least once in your life. Even if you're born and raised in a Muslim family, for example, or a Muslim society, you still have to say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah at least once in your life. Because you have to show, you have to declare you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it is considered to be the best dhikr, at least according to so many different scholars. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, أَفْضَلُ مَا قُلْتُ أَنَا وَالنَّبِيُّونَ مِن قَبْلِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. The best of dhikr that I've said, me and the prophets before me, is La ilaha illallah. And he said, مَنْ قَالَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ مُخْلِصًا دَخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ. Whoever says La ilaha illallah with full sincerity in his heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him the Jannah. And he said, أَكْثِرُوا مِنْ شَهَادَةِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ قَبْلَ أَنْ يُحَالَ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهَا. Make frequent mention of La ilaha illallah before you will not be able to say it. And that's why he made it a sunnah to remind the people who are dying to say La ilaha illallah. وَلَقِّنُوهَا مَوْتَاكُمْ. If you see somebody who is dying, you should remind him to say La ilaha illallah. Maybe he would get that promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the Prophet, that he will be in the Jannah. And then the sunnah teaches us a very beautiful adab, that if you try it with one person who is dying, and if he doesn't want to say it, do not keep reminding him with this. Just leave him alone. It is not good to keep telling him, say La ilaha illallah multiple times. Just remind him once. Maybe in a bit you can remind him one more time. But do not keep persistent and telling him, just say La ilaha illallah. It is not part of the adab. Just leave him alone. Imam Abu Zur al-Razi, one of the great scholars of hadith of his time, there's a very, very famous story about his death. He said he was dying, and then a group of people went to visit him in his house. And the house was full of guests and people. And everybody knew that he just died in maybe a few minutes. And among the guests were two of his major close students, very famous scholars of hadith. They were like the biggest names of scholars of hadith at this time. The scholars of hadith, the scholars who studied the narrators of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, who investigated all those people and made basically profiles of credibility for each narrator of the hadith to filter the hadith from being authentic or weak or other categories. So these two students wanted to remind their teacher who is dying to say La ilaha illallah. But they both felt very shy to explicitly tell him, say La ilaha illallah. And they said because he was their teacher, he had a very intimidating character, and people used to respect him so much. And the relationship with their teacher was very kind of formal, and they were very shy to tell him, say La ilaha illallah. So they had to come up with another kind of a beautiful trick that they came up with to remind him indirectly to say La ilaha illallah. So they acted together as if they are studying one of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. This is their discipline, this is their science that they've been studying all of their lives. So they acted as if they are investigating the chain of narrator of the hadith that says, "Man kana akhiru kalamihi la ilaha illallah dakhala al-jannah." Whoever his last words in this life is La ilaha illallah will enter the paradise. So they're acting as if they are discussing the narrators of this hadith, and each one started mentioning his own chain of narrator that he had through his own connection with his own teachers, until the Prophet ﷺ, which we call it the isnad, the chain until the Prophet ﷺ. So he would say, I heard this hadith from so and so, and he heard it from so and so, and he heard it from so and so, all the way to the Prophet ﷺ. So the first person started to saying this. And once he reached قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet ﷺ said, he stopped and he couldn't continue. He was so emotional that he couldn't say even the hadith. So the other one tried after him, and he said, حدثني فلان عن فلان. So and so told me, so and so told me, and he mentioned all the chain all the way to the Prophet ﷺ, until he got to قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he couldn't continue. So the teacher who is dying, he noticed, he understood what they're doing. So he asked them to help him sit down. He said أقعدوني, just help me sit down. So he sat down, and he started saying his own chain of narrators to the Prophet ﷺ about the same hadith. He said, حدثني فلان عن فلان. He started saying, I heard this from so and so, from so and so, until he reached قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, من كان آخر كلامه لا إله إلا الله. Whoever his last words is لا إله إلا الله. And then he died. He didn't even finish the hadith. He didn't even finish the second part that says he will enter the Jannah. The beauty of the story literally says in the books of biographies that he died once he finished the ha. They were that precise. They said, he said, ha, Allah, the last letter is ha, and he died. The point of the story is, it is not that easy to say La ilaha illallah before you die, just believe me, right? Because we all have come across so many different stories, and we all hear stories here and there about like people dying. We all hear stories about husnul khatima and su'ul khatima, people who die in a good situation, or people who die in, may Allah save all of us, in a bad situation, or on committing a sin or doing something bad or evil. It is really not that easy. We all know stories about people who were reminded to say La ilaha illallah and they couldn't say it. Not because they have a health condition that prevented them from saying it. They can't say it. If they were alive and they were functioning normally before the death, he can utter the word if he wants, or if she wants. But when you are in this fitna, when the angel of death is coming to take your soul out from your body, it's not going to be the same easy as you think. So, if this Imam, Allahu A'lam, this is what we think of him at least, if this Imam didn't live all of his life by La ilaha illallah, I don't think he would be able to say it before his death. Unless if it's just the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is not about only knowing what does La ilaha illallah mean. It's about the reflection of La ilaha illallah in your heart. That's why, back to Imam al-Dardir, this beautiful, when he said, وَيَنْطَوِي فِي كِلْمَةِ الْإِسْلَامِ مَا قَدْ مَضَى مِنْ سَائِرِ الْأَحْكَامِ. His following verse, he said, فَأَكْثِرًا مِنْ ذِكْرِهَا بِالْأَدَبِ. So make sure you mention this word a lot. Make sure you have it as a big part of your schedule of dhikr. Each Muslim has to have a schedule of dhikr, right? A word of dhikr, that every day you have a number of adhkar that you say. So he said, make sure you mention La ilaha illallah as much as you can. فَأَكْثِرًا مِنْ ذِكْرِهَا بِالْأَدَبِ. And he said, there's a condition to say this, you have to say it with adab. And there is a long chapter in spirituality about how to have adab, how to mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with adab. There are adab. Adab means like manners or etiquettes. There are etiquettes before you start saying the dhikr. There are etiquettes during the dhikr itself. There are etiquettes after the dhikr. Right? And we should know these things, because sometimes we think of dhikr is just like, I'm driving or I'm walking or I'm doing something, I'm just like gonna do some dhikr. Keep doing that, don't stop doing this, just like, so don't let the shaitan trick you on this. But in general, if you want to elevate your spiritual rank, your spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, sometimes you have to make time only for dhikr. Just sit and do dhikr. Just sit and read Quran. Do not put the Quran on when you're doing something else only. Keep doing this. Again, I'm not saying this is wrong, but I'm saying you need to try to commit more to these things. Because there's a reflection of these things in your heart. There's a reflection of these things in your life. You're not going to get these reflections if you do not put enough commitment to them. That's why he said, فَأَكْثِرًا مِنْ ذِكْرِهَا بِالْأَدَبِ تَرْقَى بِهَذَا الذِّكْرِ أَعْلَى الرُّتَبِ. This dhikr, when you keep mentioning it, it will elevate you to the highest ranks, spiritual ranks with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do you need to commit to this? Because you need to understand what you're saying. You need to reflect on what you're saying. Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he said like, what does it mean if you keep saying La ilaha illallah wa anta abidu hawaka wa dirhamaka wa dinarak? So what does it mean if you keep saying La ilaha illallah and you are a slave of your own money, of your own wealth, of your own desire? What does it mean if you are negating all these different gods and deities besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you are worshipping yourself? You are worshipping your desires, you are worshipping your money, you are worshipping your position. What does it mean to say La ilaha illallah? And then he said, وَمَاذَا يَكُونُ جَوَابُكَ? Like, what would be your answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he asks you about La ilaha illallah? He would tell you, you were a liar about it. So it is not a mere utterance or mention of a word that says La ilaha illallah. The problem of Aqidah in this modern time and age we live in is we have a big crisis of spirituality in our life. These concepts are not as effective for us anymore as before. So one very common complaint that I myself hear from so many different people is that I used to have a better connection with Allah, but I'm not having this anymore. 10 years ago, I used to feel much more connected when I'm reading Quran. I used to feel much more connected when I'm praying Taraweeh in Ramadan. Right? I used to feel much more connected when I'm making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I'm not able to do this anymore. I do not find this halawa, as the Prophet said, the sweetness of dua, or the sweetness of reciting Quran, or this beauty of reflecting on the nature, or reflecting on something of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because we are in the ugliest shape of a materialistic world that the universe has ever seen throughout history, Allah knows what's going to happen in the future, but I think we are in the ugliest stage of being very materialistic, very individualistic as well. Everything is so materialistic. We think of anything just to be tangible. Any concept of metaphysics or any concept of spiritual does not exist anymore. Even when we think of what I called at the beginning stories of a childhood, we think of angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we think of death, if we think of the angels of death, or the angels of in the grave, or these events that will happen on the Day of Judgment, these things, when we used to hear them because we had this innocence of the childhood and we get a little bit intimidated or scared sometimes because it's a big deal that we have to be ready for. But now most of these things, we'll hear them and, okay, sure. This is the best answer or the best reaction that we would have. Some people would say it does not make any sense anymore, right? Because it doesn't make sense to them to believe in something that they didn't see, something that they cannot test, something that they cannot tangibly interact with. Why would they believe in the angels of Allah? Why would they believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah? I know this fits more Aqidah class, not this class, but I'm just saying we have to reflect on what caused our spiritual problem. Why don't we feel as connected as before with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Materialism is a big problem. Individualism is a big problem. Scientism is a big problem as well. Everything is becoming very scientific. And people now are making science the new Rabb and the new Lord in their life, that they are worshiping literally science in a metaphorical sense, of course. Each one of these ones, we can have a long discussion about it, but we have to identify the problems that are causing our spiritual problem with our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving forward to the core essence of the class, starting from talking about the hereafter, talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah. And to us, the afterlife starts with death, al-Maut, the ultimate fact that we all believe in, right? All human beings assert to the fact of death, at least to my knowledge. Everybody knows that death is an ultimate fact that will happen to everybody. That's why a question arises is, like, when we say in our Aqidah, you have to believe in death, like everybody does, so what's the problem? Right? Like, يَجِبُ الْإِيمَانُ بِالْمَوْتِ. They say that in the books of Aqidah. وَوَاجِبٌ إِيمَانُنَا بِالْمَوْتِ. We have to believe in death. They do not mean that you need to believe in death that is going to happen. That's not the issue. Because we know that it is going to happen to all of us. You need to believe in death the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you is going to happen to you. So you need to believe in death in a certain way, in a certain framework, in a certain worldview that the Prophet ﷺ and the Quran have taught you. It's not in the mere fact of losing life. Right? When you say you have to believe in death, this in the Islamic context, it means that you really have to believe in it in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have told us about it in the Quran or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Sunnah. The discussion of death in Islamic tradition starts from a very theological point that begins with death is merely the absence of life, or it's an independent entity itself. So this is the first reflection just they begin with, on a theological level more than a spiritual level, even if it has actually a very spiritual reflection. But I said, do we consider it as just the absence of life? Or it's an entity, it's a makhluk, it's a different creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What do you think? So the default is life, and then once life is absent, that means it's death. So amrun adami, it's just like the absence of life. So there is no an actual existence of an entity that is called death. Or we have two different separate creations, that one is called life and one is called death.
I think it's the second one, because there is like a experience that goes on with death. That's my reason. I think it's a different creation.
Two different things.
Yeah.
Does the Quran talk about this? Is there any mention in the Quran about this point? Yes.
That's in
Surah?
Surah Al-Mulk. Surah Al-Mulk.
الذي خلق الموت والحياة. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Mulk, the one who created life and death. So this verse in Surah Al-Mulk, it supports which argument? That it's a separate entity, created entity, or it's the absence of life? It's a separate thing, right? And that was actually the dalil for those people who said, because there was a disagreement in the discipline of theology, that some of them said it's the absence of life, and some of them said no, it's actually something created. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ, the one who created life and death. Some people said no, khalaqa here doesn't mean actually create, it means that he destined this. He designed it and he destined it. It still can mean that just the mere absence of life. Some people said the meaning of the ayah is خَلَقَكُمْ لِلْمَوْتِ وَالْحَيَاةِ. He created you for life and death. This is the metaphorical meaning, and all these opinions are in the tafsir. And the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith reported by Sayyiduna Abu Darda, he said, if it wasn't for three things, the son of Adam would never humble down in his life. Only three things that humiliated human beings. He said, number one, faqr, poverty. the lack of financial resources in this life. And number two, sickness. And number three, death. We have an instinct of being arrogant. All of us, all human beings. Said the three things that, and the expression in Arabic was actually beautiful. He said, لولا ثلاث ما طأطأ ابن آدم رأسه. Meaning, if it wasn't for these three things, the son of Adam wouldn't actually bow down by his head. It's poverty, it's sickness, and death. So the discussion was based on this ayah, الذي خلق الموت والحياة. And then they said Allah mentioned death first, actually, not life. The one who created death and life. Death was mentioned first. Said because he wanted you to be more attentive towards this word, because the first one to be mentioned. Because if you think in all of your life that death is coming soon, you would have a different attitude. So he wanted you to hear this word first before hearing the word life or the word hayah. One of the scholars, after mentioning all these different theological points and he mentioned the ikhtilaf, the differences of opinions and the proofs, he concluded it in a very beautiful way. He said, what you really need to know is that death is the biggest calamity or affliction that would happen to you. هو أعظم المصائب. The Quran called it مصيبة. مصيبة means an affliction or a calamity. الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. So that's why we call it مصيبة الموت. And he called it in a different ayah, مصيبة الموت. The calamity of death. So what you need to know after knowing all these different philosophical arguments is that it's the greatest calamity. Or it's a great calamity. And then he said, he's talking to the reader of his book, he said, and you know what is a greater calamity? Is you being heedless of it. So you need to know that it's almost the greatest thing that happens to you in your life, to end your life. But a greater calamity than death itself is the ghafla, is the heedlessness of the fact that you will die sooner or later. So when we say that we need to believe in death, is that we need to believe it the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to believe it, to believe in it. And then to understand death, we need to understand something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in us that is called ar-ruh. Some people call it the soul, some people call it the spirit. In the religious tradition, in other religions like Christianity, they have differences between the soul and the spirit. But we have in Islam ar-ruh. This is the one concept, regardless of the translation that you would go for. So the bottom line is, we all know the ayah in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. They're asking you about the soul, about the ruh. Say that the matter of ruh belongs only to Allah. So no one actually knows about ar-ruh. But yet we still had so many different discussions in our history, in our tradition, about what is ar-ruh. Is it a secret that nobody knows about? Some people said that because Allah said this and we don't know about it. So it's just a secret. There is no way that you can know what is ar-ruh. Why? Because it's something unseen, and the only source of knowing the unseen, as we established at the beginning, is through the Quran or the Sunnah. We do not have texts that are talking about them, so we don't know what is ar-ruh. That's why they said having the discussion of what is ar-ruh is makruh. So they made the hukm out of this. They said, like, do not actually discuss it. Do not say what is ar-ruh. Do not try to define the essence of ar-ruh. Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell us to discuss it, didn't tell us about it, so we really don't need to do that. We have other things to basically care about. So many of the Salaf held this opinion. Some other scholars said, no, the ayah doesn't mean that we shouldn't be discussing this. And we need to talk about what is the essence of ar-ruh. We need to at least to suggest some opinions and arguments, like what is ar-ruh. Imam al-Nawawi, he was describing both opinions, and he said, according to the second one, that there is a definition for ar-ruh. He said, the best definition that I found, or the best description, he didn't have a very technical definition, but he said the best description I found about ar-ruh, he said it is something that doesn't have any kind of density, that is running our body transparently without seeing it. So that's why we say human being is a body and soul. He said the body, we all know the body, and we can study it, we can dissect it. We don't know the soul, but it is something, they call it like literally, something very gentle, very transparent, that is running in the body, but we cannot see it. And they gave the example, they said, look, if you look at a very small flower or a plant, and if you want to dissect it more and more, and you cut it apart for so many different small pieces, tiny pieces, you would find like very little drops of water running in that plant. So this water that is running in that plant is like the ruh in your body. It's like the soul that is running in your body. And what made them think of the ruh this way, they said, because there are so many hadith talking about the ruh, that the ruh goes here and comes back and goes up and goes down and meets with people, and the ruh moves after people die, and all these different things. So that means it has a substance somehow. or it has an essence, not a substance. It has an essence somehow, so it moves. It has some sort of form. It has a form, basically. The majority said no. That's why Imam al-Laqani, this is two verses from a famous poem in Aqidah. He said, وَلَا تَخُضْ فِي الرُّوحِ إِذْ مَا وَرَدَ نَصٌّ عَنِ الشَّارِعِ. Do not discuss and do not argue about ruh, because there is no nas, there is no text mentioned in the Shara, in the law, by the lawgiver. There's nothing that was mentioned about ruh. And then he said, لكن وجد لمالك هي صورة كالجسد. He said, there's an opinion that we found tradition attributed to Imam Malik rahimahullah, that ruh has a form like the body. And then he said, but this opinion is not actually the very popular opinion among the scholars, so do not really discuss it so much. But the discussion existed in tradition. One of the other great scholars, his name is Al-Izz ibn Abd salam, he said actually every human being has two souls, not only one soul. لكل إنسان روحين. He said you have two souls in you. He said the first one is the soul of awakeness and sleep. This is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed it in a way that as long as this ruh is in your body, you are awake. Once this ruh, the first one, leaves your body, you sleep. And then this ruh moves around the bigger realm and starts seeing dreams. This is a ruh different than the other ruh. And the other ruh, the other type of soul, is the ruh of life and death. That as long as it's in you, you are alive. Once it leaves your body, you're dead. So he differentiated between awakeness versus sleep, life versus death. He said this is the only way that we can understand it. He didn't just make this up. He actually had it from a brilliant implication from an ayah in the Quran. He said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الله يتوفى الأنفس حين موتها والتي لم تمت في منامها فيمسك التي قضى عليها الموت ويرسل الأخرى إلى أجل مسمى. We'll discuss this ayah more, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about taking the souls of people while they are asleep. And they said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep one soul and will release the other one until a certain period of time, and until a distant time that is destined for this soul, until it leaves the life forever. This is not the only sound meaning like understood from the ayah, but the ayah might imply this opinion that Imam Al-Izz ibn Abd salam said. The Prophet ﷺ also said in a hadith, Al-arwah junudun mujannada. He said the soul or the souls or the arwah are a massed army. جنود مجندة فما تعارف منها ائتلف وما تناكر منها اختلف. He said, when they already know each other, they are friendly. When they do not know each other, they disagree and dispute. So he's talking about souls. He's not talking about human beings. Right? He's only talking about the souls. That's why one of the scholars said a beautiful meaning. He said, when you meet someone, whether you know him before or not, and you face him, and you show a kind of a compassion face to face with this person, versus when you meet someone and you don't like this person for whatever reason, and you just turn your back completely to this person, said these two contrary situations or contradictory situations, they are reflections of what happened between your souls before. And then they connected this hadith to the ayah in the Quran, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that one day before we all were created, we were brought up in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He asked us, each one of us was there, but we don't know and we don't remember. But we were there. And He asked us, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I your Lord? قالوا بلى. They said, yes, definitely. Shahidna. Said, we assert to this, we testify for this. And then He told us that you will forget about this testimony. أن تقولوا يوم القيامة إنا كنا عن هذا غافلين. You will come at the day of judgment and tell me, we forgot. We don't remember that we said this before. Specifically the people who denied Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afterwards. So this happened because the Quran told us that this happened already. Do we remember? No, we don't. Does any one of us remember this day? The scholar said it's not impossible to remember this day, by the way. He said it's rationally possible that you can remember this day. And they said there were people who already remember this day. There was that scholar that once he said, I remember who was on my right side and who was on my left side on this day. Allahu A'lam. This is what he claimed. This is what he said. So, but this is kind of far-fetched. But the point is, what happens in this life when you meet with people and interact with is a reflection of what happened between the souls. This is one of the implications of this hadith, Al-arwahu junudun mujannad, that they are a massed army. They are put together. They are gathered together. And then some of them will agree and some of them will disagree. Whatever happens in this life is a reflection of what happened between these souls before. In the tradition, in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah or death specifically, sometimes he says al-ruh, sometimes he says al-nafs, and we need to be careful with the terminologies. But in this context of the hereafter, he always means the same thing. When he says al-ruh or al-nafs, most likely he means the same thing. He asked the companions sallallahu alaihi wasallam once, and he said, didn't you see when the man died that his eyes were fixedly open? Like he would look up and his eyes are until, that's why it's a sunnah to close the eyes of the person who died. Once after he died, don't leave him for a longer time. So the Sahaba said, yeah, we noticed that, but we don't know why. Because yeah, we noticed that people, once they die, you just look up in a very fixed position. So he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is because of the fact that al-mayyitu yutbi'u basarahu nafsah. He said, once a person dies, his eyes are looking at his soul when it's leaving. So he used the word nafs, which is soul. It's the same meaning here, that he's looking at his soul. He can't see his soul leaving his body and quitting the body. That's why the question is, where does the soul reside after death? Once a person dies, where does the soul go? Does it perish? Does it end completely? So it's an end of life, soul and body. Or it's only the end of the body, and then the life is still, the soul is still actually alive. So most of the hadith, or all the hadith and the ayat, they are meaning that the ruh is still alive. Your soul is still alive. It's going to be enjoying the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if that was the destiny of your soul. Or may Allah save us, it will be in the punishment and the wrath and the ghadab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if that was the destiny that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destined for somebody. And the fact that your body has perished does not mean necessarily that your soul will be perishing as well. The Prophet ﷺ said in this beautiful hadith, إِنَّمَا نَسَمَةُ الْمُؤْمِنِ طَيْرٌ يُعَلَّقُ فِي شَجَرِ الْجَنَّةِ. Said the ruh of the believer is a bird that sits in the streets of the garden of the paradise. That means right after death, that he's not talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah, he's talking about between your death and the day of judgment. He said, حَتَّى يُرْجِعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَى جَسَدِهِ يَوْمَ يَبْعَثُهُ. Then one day, the day of resurrection, Allah will return your soul back to your body. So your soul is still alive after death, all the way until the day of judgment. And then once the day of judgment starts, and we'll talk about it, one of the beginning events of this day is an-nafkhu fi as-sur, the blowing of the trumpet on this day. And this is the start, the official start of the day of judgment. And there are two blowing of the trumpets on the day of judgment. There's a nafkhatul ula wa nafkhatul thaniya. So once the first nafkha, the first blowing of the trumpet happens, every single being, every single living being will die and perish. Everything. Human beings, any living being, is not only the human beings. So the ruh at this moment would also perish and end at this time or not? The majority of scholars said yes. Everything. Your soul, that will be the end for your soul. And then right after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrects every person, soul and body. This is the meaning of كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ. Everything on top of it will perish. The ayah in Surah Al-Rahman. Some other people said no, the ruh would actually still be alive, because they said one other ayah made an exception. وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَصَعِقَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. When the first blowing of the trumpet happens, every single one in the heavens and in the earth will die. And then he said, إِلَّا مَنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ. So the ayah made an exception, except for the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed otherwise. And they said, okay, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in a different ayah, and the ayat of the Quran about the day of judgment, sometimes they appear to you contradictory, by the way. So that's why you have to put all of them in the same context to understand them coherently. There's so many different ayat about the day of judgment. The day of judgment is one of the biggest, if not the biggest theme in the Quran. And yet we do not talk enough about it. But one of the most repeatedly mentioned things in the Quran is the day of judgment. Specifically the Makki Quran. It's all about the day of judgment. Over and over again, talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah, Yawm al-Qiyamah, Yawm al-Qiyamah. So many different names, so many different contexts. Sometimes the same fact, the same event, the ayah is just repeating it with one letter, a word different. This point of a nafkh fi as-sur, like 5 to 6 ayat, almost the same thing. Sometimes with only literally really one preposition that is different from this sentence or this ayah and the other ayah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing the same thing in different contexts, in different surah, in different part of the Quran. So he said in an ayah, كُلُّ شَيْءٍ هَادِكٌ إِلَّا وَجْهَهُ. Everything will perish except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said, so there is no exception. They said, but he made an exception of their ayah about this trumpet, about the blowing of the trumpet. And then they said, because the ayat are talking about different events and different timeline for these events, and we will talk about the timeline of the day of judgment. But long story short, the soul is something that we don't really know the essence of it, and then once we die, the soul keeps its sort or form of life in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destined for it in terms of the enjoyment or the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The soul is different than the aql, is different than the intellect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So two different things. So we have body, we have soul, we have aql, we have intellect. Intellect, your aql is the way you understand all of these things. And it's the only reason that you are mukallaf, you are responsible, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds you accountable for what you do. And so in Arabic language we call it aql. So do you know the derivation, the root word of the word aql? Do we use this word in any other meaning in Arabic language? What is the meaning of aql literally? Like not this function or the brain or the intellect. What is the meaning of aql?
Tying of the camel.
What?
Tying your camel.
Tying your camel, or tying something, camel or anything. That's one of the meanings. Yaqil yarbit, to tie something, right? It's one of the meanings. One other meaning is yamna, is to prevent against something. So some linguists said it's called the aql because it has to prevent you from doing stupid things. Really, this is what he said. He said it warns you against doing things that you know they have bad consequences. So aql, so imagine your aql is something that is always pulling you back, do not do stupid things, right? That's why when somebody does something stupid, we say, are you out of your mind? Right? Because you're doing something that is not rational, something that is completely wrong. That means you must have been out of your mind. Because aql yaqiluka an al-khata. It should like pull you back if you are going to commit something wrong. So aql, this intellect, is something different than the soul. The soul is what makes your body alive in general, and then the aql is the intellect that gives you the ability to understand and to grasp the knowledge in this life. There's also so many different definitions of aql in tradition. Some people said it's a spiritual secret that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in human beings. Some people said it's not actually the brain, it is something that's in your body in a certain place that we don't know where, but it has a reflection and a light that is connected to your brain. So many different definitions in philosophy. But what we care about is we need to make sure that our aql is functioning in the right way. We need to know that we know the consequences of things that we do in our life. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destines death for somebody, we all know that there is someone that we call the angel of death, Malakul Maut. And it's mentioned in the Quran. The Quran didn't mention the name of this angel, but the very famous tradition, we call him Azra'il. Is the very famous name that most of us at least know of. And the meaning of Azra'il is Abdul Jabbar. Is that the one of the meaning, because it's not originally an Arabic word, but the meaning of the word is Abdul Jabbar, according to a famous tradition. This is the angel that is entitled by this job from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take the lives and the souls of all beings, not all the human beings, even animals, anything that is alive, and then Allah destines or decrees death for. This angel is the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted him with this job. Okay, we all know this as a fact, but we find in the Quran ayah that says, Allahu yatawaffa al-anfusa hina mawtiha. Allah takes the souls at the time of their death. So is it Allah who takes our souls or the angel of death? So they said the ayah means the real original power is belonging only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this angel is only a cause that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, or a reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created to cause his death. So obviously when we do something, we know that Allah is the one who enabled us to do it, right? وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. If you did something, you say that happened by the will of Allah. This is the meaning of لَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ, right? One of the most important implications of this dhikr is I've never done anything just by my own will and power. It's by the tawfiq, by the enablement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said, okay, so this is the meaning of this ayah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in a different ayah, قُلْ يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ مَلَكُ الْمَوْتِ الَّذِي وُكِّلَ بِكُمْ. The angel of death who is set over you will take your souls. But then in a different ayah, he said, حَتَّى إِذَا جَاءَ أَحَدَهُمُ الْمَوْتُ تَوَفَّتْهُ رُسُلُنَا. And when death comes to one of them, our messengers, which means angels, a plural word, would take his soul. So is it only one angel of death, or we have so many different angels of death? Because some people said he has assistants, he has people who help him. And if there are two people dying at the same time in two different countries, is it the same angel who's taken the life of both? And Allah give him whatever extraordinary power that he can do these things? Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created so many different angels that can do all of these things in the same time. Both are possible, we don't know. But what we should know is there are different points that we should think about when it comes to death. Number one, there is a famous nasiha and advice from the Prophet ﷺ is that do not wish for death. Do not wish for death. Do not say, I wish I die. Is this something absolutely wrong? Or it might come a point of life that we can say, I wish if I'm dead. Is there any justification for a Muslim to wish for death?
When Maryam radiallahu anha wished for death when she was giving birth.
Okay, that's a good example. Sayyidah Maryam alayhi salam, when she was giving birth to Isa, she said, Ya laytani mittu qabla hada. I wish if I died before this. But again, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يتمنين أحدكم الموت لضر أصابه. No one of you shall wish for death because of a problem that happened to him, or like any kind of harm that happened to him. So aside from the story of Maryam, we can interpret it in multiple ways. But is it a universal thing that nobody ever should wish for death, or might happen? There are certain circumstances that might make a person actually, or make it legitimate for a person to wish for death.
I once heard that there will come a time where people will ask to be in the grave. They will want death because of the times, the difficulty of the time.
Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this action in the hadith as one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, that people would pass by graves and they would wish if they were in the place, or like if they were the ones who had been buried already. But he is telling us about a fact that would happen. He didn't specifically say this is right or wrong, right? Because the signs of the Day of Judgment, some of them are bad things that would happen, right? Because he was the same one again who said, do not wish for death. And the rest of the hadith says, and if you cannot help it, say, Allahumma ahini ma kanat al-hayatu khayran li wa amitni ma kana al-mawtu khayran li. Like, say, oh Allah, like, keep me alive as long as life is better for me, or cause me death if death actually would be better for me. So like, this is the maxim that you can say, but do not say explicitly that you are wishing for death. Yes. It has to be what?
Like in war?
For a shahada, yeah. If somebody is actually is fighting for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is wishing for the shahada, and the Prophet ﷺ had this already, and he himself wished for the shahada. So that could be an exception for wishing death. But aside from shahada, again, normal life, would we still wish for death or not? And why? If a person is in trouble, why is a problem? Which is better for us? Like, you just ask a very general question. Which is better for us, life or death? What?
Depends on how you live your life.
Okay, like in our average circumstances living in this modern time and age, in Windsor. So do we say like life is better for us in general, or if you want to answer the question personally, or death is actually better? Yes, Sam.
I'd say generally, for any of us, life, I would say, is better to wish for because it's an opportunity. If you have sins that you need to repent from, repent. If you have good deeds that you want to do, then more opportunity for you.
Okay, that was actually mentioned in the hadith. This, what you said, is explicitly mentioned in the hadith, because the Prophet ﷺ said in a different version of the same hadith, he said, لا يتمنين أحدكم الموت. No one should wish for death. إما محسنا فلعله يزداد. Maybe he's been doing good, so he would increase his good deeds. وإما مسيئا فلعله يستعتب. يستعتب يعني يرضي الله سبحانه وتعالى. Or he's been sinning and he has an opportunity to repent and to fix the situation. So that was one of the things that were mentioned by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He also said in a different hadith that إذا مات انقطع عمله. He said, if you die, hadith talks about the same point. If you die, you have no opportunity anymore. It's done. Your record stops because you're not alive anymore. And then he said, وَإِنَّهُ لَا يَزِيدُ الْمُؤْمِنَ عُمْرَهُ إِلَّا خَيْرًا. He said, if you are a mu'min, if you're a believer, you have a bigger opportunity to keep doing good deeds and good things in your life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would raise your hasanat. Yes? During Hajj, wishing death during Hajj, right? Okay, so according to so many hadith, you wish for death on a good khatima. You wish for death like after doing something righteous. But you do not specify like right now. Or like in this year, for example. But you can make dua that we always make dua, Allahumma ahsin khatimatan, Allah give us like a good end of our life. Or a righteous end of our life. So many hadith are talking about do not wish for death. Right? The maximum is you make that dua, that you leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's of course everything is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there is actually a hadith reported from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu that he made dua that he wants Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make him die. That was towards the end of his life. He was very overwhelmed and very exhausted. And we know Umar to be that very big personality, and he was the very famous leader and the caliph of Muslims. So they said he was coming back from like a trip and he was so tired, he stopped his camel, he got down, he lied down on the ground in the street, like in a random area, and he started making dua. He said, Allahumma kaburat sinni. He said, oh Allah, I'm getting very old in age. وضعفت قوتي, and my strength has weakened. وانتشرت رعيتي, and the people I'm ruling are scattered everywhere. فاقبضني إليك. So make me die, cause me death. غير مضيع ولا مقصر, without missing out on anything or having neglected anything. He said, before a month passes, he was dead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted his dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered his dua. He said, Abu Hurairah, we talk about very famous names of the companions. He once told people, if you know anybody, he was using figurative speech. He said, if you know anyone who can sell death, let me know. I need to buy death. The metaphor might not sound very okay in English, but it has a very strong meaning in Arabic. He said, I wish if I can buy death, because the meaning is, of course, obviously that I want to die. So many different traditions on this concept. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah commented on one of these hadith in his commentary on Sahih Muslim. He said that generally speaking, it's makruh, it's very offensive to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cause you death. Even if you are in trouble, even if you are afflicted by something harmful. He said, but if you are worried about your own religion, that could be an exception. If you are worried of fitna in your religion, not anything else, not something materialistic, but something actually about your deen or your religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, there is no karaha. I said, we know so many of the Salaf who did this before. And there is a hadith actually of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in which he said, Al-mawtu khayru lil-mu'mini min al-fitna. Death is better for a believer than fitna. Of course, the word fitna is very vague sometimes. It's very hard to define it technically, but in general, if it's something very personal to decide on. If you are really very scared about losing your deen, so that could be. You're not recommended to do that, but that could be an exception that is not actually bad or makruh to do this. And he himself, part of his dua, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said once in a dua, وَإِذَا أَرَدْتَ بِعِبَادِكَ فِتْنَةً فَاقْبِضْنِي إِلَيْكَ غَيْرَ مَفْتُونٍ. He's talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, if you are causing the people fitna, so take me, take my life away before you cause them the fitna. So this is number one, speaking of things that happens before death. Once people die, the souls of people actually, who are dead already, they can meet with each other. And this is something very established in the Sunnah. That the souls of the dead people, they actually yatazawarun, they visit each other and they talk and they have some sort of communication between each other. Of course, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a part of the blessings and the na'im that Allah grants them if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them. One other thing they said, the skies or the heavens, they cry for the death of a believer. And it's beautiful because it was implied from an ayah, that the ayah is talking about Fir'aun. When Pharaoh died and his people, he said, فَمَا بَكَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّمَاءُ وَالْأَرْضُ. Allah said that neither the heavens nor the earth have cried for those people. Because the Quran tells us about these beautiful natural phenomena that even the other creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they feel bad about what human beings are doing. They feel what we do. And we connect with them somehow. Sometimes, that's why he said that when a bad person dies, everybody rejoices, everybody feels so happy, including the trees and the creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because they are part of this universe that we live in. Sometimes, because we are arrogant, we think we are the only beings living in this universe. We do not think of anything else. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created He said, إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالِكُمْ. They are like you, they are nations like you. You're not better than them except by the fact that Allah has honored you to be better than them. It's not just because it's a mirror inherently in you that you deserve by default. if you are doing something good, that's a different point. If you're doing something good and righteous and then death comes to you, death will be very easy for you. So death, generally speaking, is very difficult. What we call sakaratul maut. What happens to people actually when they are dying, it is very difficult. Physically, spiritually, and in all levels. Even if the righteous people, even if the people who were very decent and good, death in general, that's why it's a musibah. It's really a big calamity. The Prophet ﷺ himself, he was suffering a little bit when he was dying. He was sick, of course. He had very bad sickness. But death in general is something very heavy on human beings. But if you are dying while you're doing something righteous, that makes death very easy for you. يسهل سكرات الموت. And if, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us, if you are dying doing something bad, the death will be much more harmful for you and much more difficult for you. And there are so many things that cause bad khatima or the su'ul khatima. Khatima means the end of your life. To have a bad end of your life, spiritually speaking, there are so many different things. A major reason is being careless about prayers. And these things are just based on traditions and, as they call it, logical induction. Istiqra. Like this is what we see in life, and this is what all the Muslims have been delivering over generations. That people who do not pray regularly, they have very, very, very much troubles upon their death, specifically that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might cause them to die in a very bad way. And when I say in a very bad way, not necessarily the physical way, I mean that dying while they're doing something wrong. Because in Yawm al-Qiyamah, you'll be resurrected on the same state you died at. So if Allah grants you to die in Hajj, as the sister mentioned, you'll be resurrected on the Day of Judgment, mulabbiyan, as the hadith said. You will be resurrected saying labbaik Allahumma labbaik, which is a very beautiful way of being resurrected. Shurbul khamr, drinking alcohol or wine, it's one of the major causes of a bad end of your life. Uququl walidayn, being very bad to your parents, being undutiful to your parents. It's a major cause of su'ul khatimah. Causing any kind of harm for people in general, being harmful for people around you is a major cause of the Day of Judgment. A major cause of the bad khatimah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrects you at the Day of Judgment on the same state that you died at. Last point to conclude with for tonight's class is this concept. We're still around the death phase of the hereafter. Is what we call al-ajal, or the distant period of time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for you. Each one of us was prescribed a certain period of time that he's going to live before he was born. Right? Some people would live 50 years, 60 years, 70, 10, 20, whatever number that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined for you. Allah said in the Quran, فَإِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ لَا يَسْتَأْخِرُونَ سَاعَةً وَلَا يَسْتَقْدِمُونَ. When their time has come, they will not remain behind an hour, nor will they precede it. This is something absolutely destined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, what if a person gets killed? That means his ajal was different, or his ajal changed because he died in a different way, or that means his destined ajal was destined or decreed in this way. Right? He used to say mata bi umrihi. Like a person who was alive, said he was good, was in a very good health condition, nothing was wrong, and then he got killed and he was 25. Does that mean that he was supposed to live till 60, but because he got killed, his ajal changed? Or this is what was actually destined or decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Actually, some people in history, they thought that the qatl or killing changes the ajal of people. They thought that. Some Muslims, I'm talking about Muslims, right? But the major i'tiqad, the major creed of Muslims, they said, وَمَيِّتٌ بِعُمْرِهِ مَنْ يُقْتَلُ. Whoever gets killed, that was his lifespan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for him. Allah, He was the one who caused this to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed this. Allah decreed this from the azal, way before this person was born, that this person will be killed at this age. This is his lifespan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for him. They said, fine, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, هو الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة. He is the one who created you from one soul. ثم قضى أجلا وأجل مسمى عنده. And then He decreed a term and specified another term to him. So they said, does that mean that a person might get actually two different kinds of ajal? He said, ثم قضى أجلا. He created you. Then He destined an ajal for you, and He destined another ajal that He kept to Himself. It's one of like a kind of a literal translation of the ayah. So the right understanding of the ayah said that the first ajal, ثم قضى أجلا, then he destined a life or a specified time. This is talking about your lifespan, your life period. وأجل مسمى عنده, and another destined ajal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is after your death. That you have a certain ajal that you will spend from your death all the way until the day of judgment. Because there is another life that you will be living between your death all the way until you be resurrected. This is the second stage. And then you will be resurrected, and this will be the day of judgment. And they said the dalil is in the ayah itself, because the end of the ayah said, ثُمَّ أَنْتُمْ تَمْتَرُونَ. And then you dispute and disagree. Said tamtarun, dispute about the day of judgment. So the ayah is actually talking about the day of judgment. They said, okay, fine. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said also in a different ayah, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eliminates whatever He wills and confirms whatever He wills. So that means that sometimes the qadr will change, because He said He might change things subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they said, this is explaining the will and the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not necessarily what would happen to us in our life. So they kept thinking of all these ayat together, and then they said, okay, does the ajal increase or decrease? Because there are ayat in the Quran that, or ayat and hadith in the Sunnah that imply this. The Prophet ﷺ told us in this hadith, لا يزيد في العمر إلا البر. Nothing extends one's lifespan but righteousness. If you are righteous in your life, you have an opportunity to live longer. So they said, does that imply that so our ajal might actually change? Said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said in the Quran, وَمَا يُعَمَّرُ مِن مُعَمَّرٍ وَلَا يُنقَصُ مِنْ عُمُرِهِ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ. No aged person is granted additional life, nor is his lifespan lessened, but that it's a register. It is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually destined and decreed. So they said this ayah is talking about the different ages of people. Allah has decreed for each one of us a certain specific time that we are going to live. People can die anytime, and we all know this. At any time during all of your life journey, you can die anytime. The meaning of the ayah is that increase and decrease doesn't mean that what will happen after you were born and existing already. It means that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is decreeing and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is destining all of these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the ability and absolute power and will subhanahu wa ta'ala to do all of these things. And then some of them said that hadith of لا يزيد في العمر إلا البر, that about being righteous and that increase your umr. They said it doesn't mean the umr in terms of the number of years and days you live. It means the blessings and the hasanat you get. That's why Laylatul Qadri khayrun min alf shahr. Right? The night of Qadr is better than 1,000 months. You might not live 1,000 months, but you can actually live 23 Laylatul Qadr. Right? So if you want to multiply 30 Laylatul Qadr that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has enabled you to attend by 1,000 months, that's definitely more than the life that you're going to live. But it's umr, right? It's age that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you. So that's why Laylatul Qadr, and by the way, the meaning of the ayah is that this is the minimum. It's not capped to 1,000. The minimum is 1,000. That's why Laylatul Qadr for some people might be better than 1,000 years, not actually months. So you have an unlimited opportunity to multiply your age of ta'ah and hasanat. And this is something specific for this ummah because we live shorter than the rest of the nations before us. People before us used to live much longer than this. We are the shortest of ages compared to all the nations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created before. But Allah wanted to compensate us with something. He said, you can increase your umr of ta'ah, your ajal of ta'ah, your ajal of obedience and righteous deeds, even though you cannot live more than average 60, 70, or 80 years in your life. Inshallah, throughout this class, we'll talk about a certain timeline covering the major events of the hereafter. I understand that it's very difficult to cover all things that happen in the hereafter in 4 classes, and one of them is done already. But we'll try to shed light on the major events that would happen on the day of judgment or once after death. We talked about general concept of death and the hereafter today, and then there's the burial and the question of the graves, and then the pleasure and the torture that happens in the grave, and then all the order of the events that happen on Yawm al-Qiyamah, in terms of like resurrection starts first, and then the reckoning, and then the hawl, and then the mizan, and the sirat, all these hadath that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would cause us to happen. Inshallah, we'll stop at this point, and starting from next time, we'll start from the fitnatul qabr or su'al al-qabr, the question in the grave and what happens when the two angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come to us right after our death. The Prophet ﷺ said, the person in the grave can hear the footsteps of the people who are walking away after the janazah, after the burial. You can hear them leaving, and the angels are coming to you in the same time. That's why he was once burying one of his companions, and he said, "Istaghfiru li akhikum fa innahu al-ana yus'al." Like, make istighfar, ask for forgiveness for this brother because he's being questioned right now. And they just literally put him under the ground or the grave. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us from the fitna of al-qabr, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless all of you. Jazakumullah khairan. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.